Good morning, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us, our second annual Lit Fest. We just heard from Sean Murphy, our founder and fearless leader, with his opening remarks. And now it is time for our very first content session of the day. It is Building Your Author Platform 101 with Bethanne Patrick. I'm going to turn it over to her in just a second, but wanted to kind of cue things up. Whether you're still writing your first draft or nervously awaiting your publication date, as an author, you're expected to have a platform. What does that mean? Why does it matter? And how do you build one? Our social media expert and author, Bethanne Patrick, who's also known online as the Book Maven, will help us understand what publishers expect, but even more important, what you can do and how you can help regardless of how you choose to publish. So no tweeting necessary, but there will be a discussion about the pleasures and perils of social media. So without further ado, I'm going to reshare my screen here and let's get us started.
Welcome to the 1455 Summer Lit Festival Author Branding Workshop with me, Bethanne Patrick, the Book Maven. Thank you so much for being here today. I hope that as writers, would-be authors, published authors, I'll be able to give you some information about how branding may help you with your journey in creativity. But first things first, I'm going to share a PowerPoint with you that I hope will help us walk through some of the most interesting aspects of branding and what it can do. So here we go. The fact that I can now accomplish screen sharing is a huge move forward in my own branding. I've been working in tech and digital spaces for a long time, but there's always something new. Here we go. So I'm Bethanne Patrick, as I said, known as the Book Maven, and I'm going to tell you a little bit about my story in a moment, but you know me as the Book Maven on Twitter, where I have quite a few followers. I have over 200,000 followers on Twitter. I'll tell you a little bit more about that in a while. It doesn't necessarily mean anything as impressive as you might think. However, I'm also a full-time freelance writer and a very busy book reviewer. I have a column each month in the Washington Post about hot books. I also review regularly for the Post, for the LA Times, for NPR Books, the Boston Globe, Lit Hub. I'm a columnist there and a contributing editor. And I also write a column for Virtuoso Life magazine. Along with that, I am an author of 3 previous books, 2 with National Geographic, 1 with Phaedon Reagan Arts, and I am writing a memoir that will come out from the Counterpoint Press in 2022 called Life B. I'll talk to you about that a little bit more in a few minutes as well. But let's get started with what my story means to our main point, which is branding. I quote unquote became the Book Maven in 2004 when I was working at AOL as the books editor. Blogs were having a moment and my bosses asked me to start one. I called it the Book Maven because The Tipping Point by Malcolm Gladwell had just been released. And I was really taken with Gladwell's explanation of mavens as people who combine deep expertise with deep passion. And I thought, that's me. I have always had a deep expertise in literature and books. I've been an avid reader since childhood. We'll talk more about that later too. And I also have a passion for talking with other people about books and teaching other people about books and sharing books with other people. So this made total sense to me. And yes, I was calling myself an expert, but in a way I was also calling myself kind of a freak. So the Book Maven became my blog, and AOL did try to copyright that. They wanted to trademark it, and they weren't able to because the copyright gods said those 3 words were too everyday, too mundane to be trademarked. That was to my advantage because I was able to take the identity I'd already built in my blogs for AOL and bring it to other places. I'm going to talk a little bit about the power of partnership in a while, but from the time I started that blog until now and through the present day, I've worked with brands including AOL, National Geographic, U.S. News and World Report, Amazon, the Coca-Cola Company, the Washington Post, Poets and Writers Magazine, the Los Angeles Times, Time Magazine, and the New York Post. Those are not all the brands I've worked with and for. It's not an exhaustive list. It's not a list of the best either necessarily, although some of these are pretty great brands. My point being, and in reading those out loud, is to share with you how instantly recognizable those brands are, how we all know what they represent. Now, someone who is not in the United States might not recognize them all, but in our community, in the literary community, as writers, we know what most of these stand for, even though they stand for very different things. A little side note that I'm going to say a couple more times during this presentation and workshop. I am not here to talk about a brand being good or bad. I know that some of these brands have had their challenges in business, finance, ethics. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm just talking about the branding. So please, if I mention a company that you dislike, know that I'm not mentioning it to say, oh, you should be like this or this is the best. It's just an example. So my expertise, of course, is in literature, books, writing, publishing, and criticism. And these are skills, we're going to talk about skills a little later too, that I've been working on for a long time, but they do, the expertise and the skills together, being a writer, being a journalist, being an author, being a critic, content marketing, being an industry thought leader, those are all things that for me have come about because I've thought about my personal brand. Again, you don't have to be the book maven. I'm already the book maven. You probably don't want to be the book maven. However, this is about my story and how I have taken a brand and used it to enhance my expertise and skills to further my career and further my professional life. Doesn't mean that it's a path you have to follow. So in the course of building my expertise and learning new skills, I've learned a few things about branding, and I want to share them with you today. You see the Ivory Soap logo here. We all know what Ivory Soap is. We probably don't use it anymore. Maybe you do, but it's always stood for something. Even if what it stands for isn't necessarily true. And so what I want to say about that is not that, Ivory Soap is supposed to be so pure. Is it really that pure? Why does it matter if it floats? Is that anything to do with purity? I don't think so. But we come up with these ideas about what something is or what something stands for. I hope that you'll use your powers to the good when you're thinking about your personal branding. And so don't be like the floating soap. Be authentic. Be real. Be sincere. Be you. Be who you are. You are the most important part of your brand. And as I said a little earlier, and we'll say again, that might be your name on the cover of a book. It doesn't have to have a funny moniker or a logo. Authenticity is about being true to who you are. This is extremely important to branding. Remember, a brand for an author is not a brand that's about, corporate standards of sales or marketing. A brand for an author really has to match what that author is doing. And although I'm not here to talk to you about the business side of using a pen name or pseudonym, I will say in terms of authenticity, it can be a really good thing. Why is that? You would think I would be saying, be you, use your real name. No. What is it you're trying to accomplish? Use a name that works with that. Sarah MacLean is the biggest romance writer in the world today, I think. She is so successful. And Sarah MacLean is such a great name for a romance author who's writing about dukes and earls and British nobility and all that sort of thing. But that is not her real name. And many other authors who write thrillers, romances, sci-fi use nom de plume because that helps them match the name with the writing. So authenticity is about, it's not about, being necessarily you. It's about being you matched with the content you. So keep that in mind. But sincerity in all things always works. Being consistent is extremely important. Do as I say, not as I do. I am not always best at this, but I have recently hired an administrator, an admin assistant to help me with this because consistency helps so much with branding. And this can be about blog posts, it can be about book releases, it could be about almost anything you're going to do. But when it comes to sending out messages with whatever you have, schedule things carefully, use a consistent tone, and keep your message on point. The scheduling is so important that 2 or 3 weeks ago, I noticed Twitter was allowing scheduling of tweets from within the Twitter client. For years, we've all been using things like Hootsuite and TweetDeck, but now Twitter is offering that inside of Twitter because they've realized how important it is to people who use Twitter to be able to schedule tweets. Now, I'm not saying they've done that for, a shiny, good reason. They're business people. They want to do what draws people to Twitter. But when you schedule things, you get people used to hearing from you in a measured way. You get people used to hearing from you regularly. There's a reason that newspapers were printed, remember the mid-20th century when you got newspapers in the morning and the evening? Schedule is really important. Tone is really important. Tone is not easy when it comes to branding, but I read those names to you of these big brands who have such good tone. They always say the same thing. They say it in the same way. Try to do that because it will make people trust you. Consistency is all about trust. Engagement is about drawing people closer to you. And I'm going to talk about community in a little while, but engagement involves something, habituation. It's called habituation. It's a tech term, I guess. It's a digital term, but I like it because it shows that you're getting people to come back. That's what engagement is about with habituation. They're coming back. Stickiness is about keeping them there once they've returned. And this can be about your message. It can be about your content. It's a way of making sure that people stick around for a while. They have something to read. They have something to do. They have something they're interested in. And you'll see that directly after stickiness, I've mentioned calls to action. Now, this can be really important in branding. Calls to action can include buy my book, sign up for my newsletter, donate to this particular charity, follow me, et cetera, et cetera. Calls to action can be done through branding. It's very easy to create an authentic, consistent, engaged brand that gets people interested in the next thing you want them to do. And of course, we'll talk about sales in a moment. That's often what it is you want them to do. It isn't always. It isn't the only thing. Try to remember that with branding too. It isn't just about the dollars. I'm going to talk about how my own branding has changed over the years, because I think it does offer a few lessons that will help you. When I started out, like so many of us, and this could be about any industry, not just publishing and writing, I wanted credibility. It happens that I started out in publishing a little late in the day. I wasn't, just out of college when I did, but that's neither here nor there. Credibility is something you can establish whenever you enter an industry. Now, I know that some of us aren't going to become Olympic medal winning figure skaters, let's say after the age of 30 or maybe even 20. But when it comes to writing, we can be at any age or stage when we decide that we want to gain some credibility. I wanted to establish a voice as an industry journalist. That was my first goal. I wanted to write book reviews. I wanted to write author profiles. I wanted to make sure that I could write for trade magazines and other sort of publications that were centered on books and publishing. And establishing that voice meant that I was credible, meant that people could depend on me. It meant that people would pay attention to what I wrote. And that credibility saw me through several jobs and several blogs as well. It was something that I'm really proud of having done. Doesn't mean I didn't make mistakes along the way. I am not here to talk about the mistakes today, except when they have something to bear on branding. But just know that everyone does that. And if you're an author who's just starting out, I don't care if you're 22 or 62, there may be some mistakes that you make, and that's okay. You're going to learn from them, absolutely. And what you learn from them and how you use those lessons will only enhance your credibility. Now, after my credibility phase, if you will, I went into a phase where I was sought after to some extent. I don't want to make too much of any of this, but that is what I call the clicks and page views stage. I was building a presence on social media. Now, for me, that happened because social media was burgeoning just at the time when I wanted to expand my brand and expand my reach a bit. It might be very different for you today. We'll talk a little bit more about what's in style in branding a little bit later. But in building a presence on social media, I found I was in a really comfortable place. I enjoyed it very much. I loved being on Twitter. I found it easy to, keep building a community on Twitter. It was just something that brought a lot of joy into my life. And that's what you should be looking for as your branding changes. What is it that brings you joy? I'm not talking about Marie Kondo and taking things out of your house, etc. I'm talking about what are the activities that really bring you joy. And towards the end of this workshop, I'm going to give us all a little pep talk about the thing that brings us joy, which is writing, but wait for that. So at a certain point, I'd done everything I thought I could do with this clicks and page views way. And I was confirmed in that when I spoke to a friend at an industry conference. And she said, do you really want to keep going after all of these numbers, these metrics, or do you want to do your own writing? That was a light bulb moment for me. And that's another reason why your branding might change, is when you realize you have hit a wall when you stopped enjoying something, or when there's something more for you to do. Maybe you keep up with the clicks and page views, but you also go on to what for me is a new phase of branding and professional identity, and that's authority. I wanted to become a sought-after literary critic. And you might say, well, you are a sought-after literary critic, Bethanne. You have this and this and this. Well, all of those things are wonderful, and I'm grateful for the work that others have put in with me to help me get to this point, but I still have things to do. As I said, I've got a book coming out in a couple of years. I'm working on it hard right now with my editor, and I also want to stretch my goal as a critic, my role as a critic, my goals and my role as a critic, because I would like to do things that are a little harder, a little longer, a little more intricate and complex. So my branding is changing along with the things that I pursue. And you'll notice I've put a picture on this slide, a painting. This painting is something that a lot of people think is actually me. And it does represent me. It is a painting called A Good Read by Sally Strand. She's a California artist. I do have permission to use it on my website from the artist, and I'm very grateful for that. But the reason I'm pointing this out to you is not because I clearly love the painting. I clearly love how much it looks like me in some ways. But when I saw it, it really clicked with me for this stage of my career. This is the kind of authority I'm after, not a commanding presence, not a loud presence, but something that's really involved in who I am. I'm an introvert, I'm a reader, I'm someone who does a lot of contemplation, I'm someone who thinks about things, I'm someone who can often be found resting her head on her hand. It just was me, I knew it, and it helped me crystallize this phase of my branding, which is why I'm so proud to use it. But I hope that seeing these stages in my career will help you consider the stages of your own, whether you've been through a couple or you're just starting out. Now, why do you need to consider branding? There's a lot of reasons, lots of reasons, and there's a lot of brands too. So before I go into the bullets on this slide, I want to say, take a look at all of your favorite brands. Go to your shelves, your pantry, your bathroom medicine cabinet, your living room tchotchkes, your whatever's on your porch or in your garden, and think about, for instance, I have one friend who every year, I'm not going to get this right, she orders all her seeds from one particular seed catalog. And she mentions that seed catalog every time because she's so excited about getting her seeds and reading the catalog. And that is so on brand for her. That's so on brand for who she is. And also, the actual catalog that she looks at is in perfect sync with her. So see what's around you, what you're already using, what you already appreciate. You'll see on this slide, I put up Burt's Bees. For some people, Burt's Bees really represents the organic life and natural ingredients and authenticity and kindness. Again, I'm not here to discuss the companies. For all I know, Burt's Bees might be, filling everything they make with chemicals. I hope not. But that's not it. It's what we perceive that really makes the difference. I'm not saying pretend. I'm not saying, use smoke and mirrors. I'm just saying that when you decide about your brand, know what you stand for. It will make you feel a lot better all the way through because, as I said, there are going to be mistakes. There are going to be lessons to be learned. There are going to be times when you're really wondering why you do it, and knowing what you stand for is going to make such a difference. So a brand can tell a story. I love this. Narrative drive is a human need. As Homo sapiens, we are compelled to tell stories about things. You can read a lot about this. There's a wonderful book called The Call to Stories by Robert Coles, PhD. And it has so much information about how humans develop and how important stories are to our development. And I'm not talking just about storybooks. I'm talking about the stories we tell ourselves, the things we make up inside our heads. For example, something we all understand, mythology. People in civilizations that did not have as much scientific knowledge as we do wondered why there were lightning bolts in the sky, and so they made up gods and goddesses who threw down lightning bolts. That's what I mean by narrative drive as a human need. We want to explain things. A brand helps explain things. A brand also gives you the opportunity for something I referred to earlier, a call to action. What should we do next? A call to action doesn't have to be about sales, as I said. It could be about donating, contributing, collaborating, suggesting. There are just so many things, but that's why you might want to consider branding, because we'll talk about networking and community in a little bit, and a call to action can be a wonderful way to help build community. Another reason to consider branding is to create an aura. I mentioned Sarah MacLean, the best-selling romance author, and her aura is of someone you want to read every book she's written when you're a romance fan, because there is an aura of romance, intrigue, beauty, fabulousness, all kinds of things. An aura can be utilitarian, glamorous, cozy, all kinds of things. For example, the brand Fenty Beauty, which is Rihanna, the singer's cosmetics line, has this fantastic aura of glamour and mystery and beauty around it. There are cozy brands like Land's End. You can go there for, a great Afghan or just the right bathrobe. Auras come off of brands whether they like it or not. So why not think about it as you're creating yours? There are some things that brands can't or shouldn't do. You don't want a brand, for example, to propagandize or tell you what to do. Now, you'll notice on this slide, I've included a little snip of the famous Keep Calm and Carry On poster that was created by the British government during World War II, during the London Blitz. And this was supposed to help people think about sticking to everyday life, sticking to their routines, so there wouldn't be incidents of mass hysteria. You don't want to do that with your brand. Leave it to wartime, leave it to governments. Don't tell people what to do. Just give them something to do. Propaganda is never a good idea. Now, brands also don't necessarily do a great job on direct sales. Branding is part of marketing, but it's only a part. I'm going to give you an example. When Twitter became very popular in 2009, 2010, many people thought it was going to be the place for selling books. It was going to be the place that people would buy books, select the books they were going to read, go and buy them immediately, and it didn't work. I know because one of my brands, Friday Reads, which I'll talk about later, was part of that for a while. It was a marketing business, not for very long. And I think part of that was because publishers found that they weren't getting the results in the marketing end. Friday Reads was better in terms of book sharing and community building than it was in book sales. But direct sales from brands, well, there's a reason that brands have sales and marketing departments. And when you create your brand, you can work on sales and marketing, but the brand itself isn't going to be the mechanism for that. That's what I'm trying to say. I hope that makes sense. And speaking of making sense, brands can't form an argument. A brand can tell a story, but it can't reason with you. It's almost self-contained. A brand can tell you a story with a beginning, a middle, and an end, but it's never going to get into debate with you because a brand is just what it is. If you don't like something, don't buy it, don't follow it, don't read about it, don't argue with it. It just because it just is. Everybody is going to say there's something they don't like, a particular kind of food, a particular kind of car, a certain genre of writing. Those things are going to exist whether you like them or not. Don't bother arguing, and don't bother trying to form an argument with your own brand. Just let your brand be what it is. Let it just be as good as it can be, and don't worry about anything in the opposition. Now, what branding contributes to your author platform? Here we have a photo of the divine Maya Angelou, who is so instantly recognizable, is so well known to us that you might think, why is she's not into branding. Maya Angelou never needed to brand herself. Did she? No, she didn't. And here's why I put her here. You want, as an author, to do the best job you can at what you do. And that's what Maya Angelou did. That is branding. Doing the best you can at what you do is branding. And it contributes to your author platform in these, well, in more than these three ways, but let me just speak about these. First, there's connection. You're going straight from your brain to the reader's brain, to the reader's consciousness. This is something that literature is very powerful in doing, and it's uniquely powerful in doing. When I speak about literature, by the way, I'm speaking about all forms: nonfiction, fiction, poetry, everything, spoken word, what have you. I do not want people to think that when I speak about literature, I'm only referring to novels. So when you read something, you are reading something that an author put down from their brain, and it's going right into your brain. It's an amazing thing. It could be, we could have a panel on that, right? But the connection that your branding as an author has is very powerful, and you want to be careful with it. So when someone recognizes you, when someone knows who you are, like Maya Angelou, that means you're someone who can be trusted inside that person's consciousness. That doesn't mean that you will have agreed with everything they've written or even read everything that they've written. It means that you know enough about their brand to say, I will try this. I know people who love Toni Morrison, who have read Beloved and just consider it one of the most important books of their lives, but have never read the Bluest Eye or Song of Solomon. And then when they read those, they're delighted because there's more. So that recognition and trust is part of my third bullet point: reliability. An author who can deliver on the promise of their book, who can take their consciousness and gift something to you that matters for your consciousness, it's incredible power. So branding doesn't have to mean having, again, a logo, a silly name, anything that's a picture or anything like that. It just means that you're consistent. It means that you're trustworthy. Really, that's what it comes down to in a lot of ways. Now, building brand you, some people might think, well, I don't have anything to brand. Well, of course you do. If you are writing or if you have written a book of any kind, you have already started on brand you. What's your book about? That's part of your brand. How did you know to write it? That's part of your brand. How did you learn all of that? That's part of your brand. Skills, expertise, and education. So, as an author, your skills are reading and writing. I spoke a few minutes ago about being a very bookish child, and I'll speak a little bit more about that when we get to your temperament and style. But your skills as a reader and writer are things that you've been honing probably for years, probably for decades. So don't take those for granted. If you've already written a book, you've used your skills to build brand you. If you've already written a book, you've used your expertise in some way. Some of you will write about history or politics or food or the performing arts or botany or whatever. All of those things are your expertise, the things that make you a subject matter expert. We love to talk about subject matter experts today, don't we? SMEs. They're so important to us. But everyone is a subject matter expert in something. Some people are subject matter experts in making school lunches. I just watched a YouTube video about that. So, you really can find something that's special about you. Doesn't mean you have to be a university professor. And speaking of universities, your education is such an important part of your brand. And not because you need to be ashamed of it or brag about it. Neither one. You can if you want, but your education is something like the author's consciousness that is inside of you. Your education is something no one can take away from you. So use it. Use what you've learned. Use the things that you know are worthwhile in forming a narrative, an argument, an analysis. So Brand You has all of those things in it. And I love this picture of skills loading in someone's head because, of course, I would be remiss if I didn't say never stop learning. Never, never stop. It is something that is so important to all of us. And that's why we're readers and writers, because we love to learn new things. And learning new things doesn't have to be a slog. I'm talking about all kinds of different writing, fun writing, informative writing, educational writing, polemic. It doesn't matter. It's worth it. Building Brand You as an author is something that takes all of what you've gotten from the world and filters it through your consciousness. Your consciousness is unique and important and as special as your thumbprints. So build Brand You is one of my messages. Now, when you're building Brand You, you have to consider your personality. I think this is very important because there are things you'll be comfortable doing and things you won't be comfortable doing. You need to know about them because sometimes you'll have to do things that you don't like to do. Sorry, there's the truth. For example, as a freelance writer full-time, I have to spend time on marketing and PR and invoicing and billing and all of that stuff. We all do when we're our own bosses. Some of you have a full-time job and work as an author in your evenings and on weekends. Some of you are doing this part-time. Some of you want to be a full-time author. Everyone who is writing has a variety of skills that she needs, every single one of us. So think about what your personality is. I'm not here to talk about, Myers-Briggs or the Enneagram, but I can tell you that most of us are more than type A or type B. Most of us are a combo platter of several different personality types, if there is such a thing. So think about what is easy for you. What is hard for you? What do you enjoy? What do you loathe? Consider those things when you're building your brand because that can help you strengthen times with the joy and minimize times with the hatred, the hated things. How do people describe you? Now, this is one of my favorite things to talk about because it was something that I first discovered when I was working on a website on my own. I was having it designed by a very, very good designer. And one of the things he said is, go ask some people how they describe you and then come back to me with their answers. And here's the thing. You're not going to ask your worst enemy to describe you, are you? You're going to ask your family, your friends, your trusted colleagues, and you might be surprised by their answers and pleasantly surprised. That is the most exciting thing. How do people describe you? One friend said when she thought of me, she thought of quiet elegance. I don't know about that, but it was something I was able to go back to the designer with and say, okay, my friend says I'm quietly elegant. What do we do with that? So ask around. You probably won't get any kinds of unwelcome answers, not from your loved ones. Tell them that you really want to know things that will help you be productive and help you decide on how to build your brand. What is your style? You should be considering more than, which earrings you wear and how you dress in the morning. As you can see, the graphic that I've included is style is a way to say who you are without having to speak. Style is part of your aura. And I'm going to talk about the word aura again. We talked about that with brands. And now this is with you specifically as you build your brand. What would people say if they met you for the first time? What do you want them to say on meeting you for the first time? What makes you comfortable? What makes you feel so good when you put it on, whether it's a necklace or a dress or a particular suit? What makes you feel good when you're around it? Is it your bookshelves? Is it a kind of chair? Is it your office? Style is made up of so many of those things. A very funny example would be the office of Miranda Priestley in The Devil Wears Prada. And Meryl Streep was playing sort of avatar of Anna Wintour, the Vogue editor. And Streep's portrayal is just so great and so on point. But that office absolutely embodied that editor's style, that editor's chic and elegance and coldness, but also need to, have a little bit of herself there with little knickknacks and china scattered around. So style can be atmosphere, it can be your website and what it looks like, as well as what you're wearing and how you're presenting. Now, here's another important slide. What niche do you fill? And I will leave it to my colleague Jean Friedman in her publishing workshop to really speak to this in the business sense, because it matters a lot when you're going after an agent, or you and your agent are going after an editor, or when you're deciding, who's going to be buying a book that you've self-published. But for your brand, what niche do you fill? Does it fix a problem? Does it answer a question? Does it build dreams? You might write something that helps people learn more about why their diet should be altered according to their blood type. You might answer a question in terms of letting people know how to put together their estate. You might build dreams by inspiring people the way Brene Brown does. And when I say fix a problem or answer a question, it doesn't just pertain to self-help or information. For example, the problem could be a reader has never met your fabulous characters before or read this amazing plot that you've come up with. So the audience doesn't always know what their problem or question or dream is. The audience sometimes needs you to fill that niche. So think about that as you're branding yourself. What do your books do? What kind of look and feel do you want for your ideal readership? Now, let's get down to the nitty-gritty for a bit. You want to build a personal brand. You don't know what shape you want it to take yet. I'm going to talk about some things that really need to be part of it, and that you'll want to maybe not include all when it all is said and done, but that you'll want to be thinking about. And the first, of course, is a website. A website today is what a business card used to be. You really must have one. And if you're an author, you really must have one, because your website is where people find you. It's fine if you want to also have a calling card, or if you also want to have book postcards or tote bags or whatever. We'll talk about swag in a minute. But a website is something that makes it easy to find you for the most people. Now, when it comes to the form of your website or what kind of website to have, you could go on Squarespace or Wix and make your own. You could go on WordPress. That's where my current website is built. Logos are optional. Things have gotten quite simple, to tell you the truth, with actually building websites for authors and writers. A lot of the people I know who do the most writing have very, very simple websites that give, a bio, information about books, where to buy them, contact info. That's about it. And so you don't need to worry about making something with all the latest bells and whistles. There are always going to be more bells and whistles. That is the message. So go simple to start out. If you want to get fancy because you have a new book coming out or you've come into some money, there's always going to be a designer you can find who will give you the look and feel that you're going after. So go ahead, be simple. That is fine. Keep it simple, stupid. Not that you're stupid. No. I am, but in some ways about websites. Now, blogging, I put down to blog or not to blog. That's one of the questions. Here's the deal. Blogging can be fantastic, especially if you're really good at it and really consistent, because you can just share so much information, and it can be anything from a long post with some thoughts to a short post promoting something you've just done. But blogging isn't for everyone, and it's no longer required for everyone either. Now, back in the day, and I'm talking 10, 12 years ago, having a blog was so important. And keeping that blog full, chock full of content was also really important. But it's no longer the case. Many people prefer to spend their time on social media. Many people don't blog ever. Many people have blogs that have kind of died natural deaths, but they're still up there. They're still hanging out. And I think that's kind of sad, because if you've put a lot of time into blog posts and you have some good, meaty blog posts somewhere, repurpose them. Make sure you get them copied, you get them mirrored, you use them somehow. Now, the one thing I will say your website absolutely has to have is contact info. And when I say contact info, it can also be really simple. Right now, on my current website, it's an email address, info@bethanthebookmaven.com. My website, if I haven't mentioned it, is bethannepatrick.com. But you could also include your PR at your publishing house. You could include an assistant's email. You could include your agent's email. Maybe you are with a speaking bureau and you want to include that info. Now, if you're with a speakers bureau already, why are you listening to me? Okay, I'm kidding, but still. Anyway, contact info is a must. Social media. I guess this is where I have the most expertise to share, but it's also where I have the least in a way, because there's no way to keep up with all of it. So here's my advice. Choose one or maybe 3 social media platforms that you really like, that actually appeal to you, and use those. Don't use them all. You don't have to worry about that. For instance, you might hate Twitter. You might find Twitter distracting, confusing, boring. Forget about it. Go to Instagram. Instagram is pretty hot anyway. You might not like the ethics, for example, of Facebook. Again, I am not here to comment on that. What I'm saying is, if that is something you dislike, don't use it. There's going to be another place for you. I know some people who only use LinkedIn. I find LinkedIn a huge snooze. But I have friends who put up so much content there and get wonderful results. It's really going back to your temperament and your style. Choose 1, maybe 2, if you have to, 3. I have a really tough time keeping up with Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. I don't think I always do the best job of it, but I do try, and that's just 3 places. So don't go for 5. You'll drive yourself nuts. Scheduled tweets and posts and videos are your friends. And something I noticed few weeks back is that Twitter is allowing people to schedule tweets from within Twitter client. And I'm not here to applaud them for that. They're a business. They're giving us what we want. But it is wonderful to be able to schedule a tweet instead of having to go over to Hootsuite or TweetDeck to do it. It's just a little bit more utility. So whatever is easiest for you, you might prefer to use Hootsuite all the time for all of your social media. There are many other platforms too that people use, some of them better for businesses than for individuals. But whatever you decide is going to be the place where you schedule your social media, make sure you schedule it. No one, and talk about mistakes I've made, no one wants to hear from the same person 4 times in 3 minutes. Oops, did that a few years back. No one wants to hear too many times about the same thing. So think about it. Do you want to have posts 3 times a week? Do you want to have tweets 3 times a day? What do you want to accomplish on Instagram? Is it to amass a lot of images to share with people, or is it to have a place for videos? Just think about these things. Thinking about social media will make it so much easier for you to do my third bullet here, which is growing a network. Now, whether or not my 200,000+ Twitter followers can be considered a network anymore, that's up for debate. Things have changed so much with the Twitter algorithm and with who uses Twitter, how many of those accounts are, not used, etc. But this is what you want to do, because whatever your actual goal is, book sales, more attention, more recognition, invitations to speak, all of these things that can't be done solely through a brand can be done as you grow your network and combine it with your brand. So remember, you want to be really, really generous, especially if you want other people to be generous with you. You can't just go online and tweet Stephen King and say, read my manuscript. Well, you can try, but he's not going to answer you, or he might make fun of you. But what you can do is start reading Stephen King's tweets, see to whom he tweets on a regular basis, see other people who follow him, other people who are new authors as well, or other authors who are established, start following them, ask someone, who is your peer to help you with a problem. And when they have problems, help with them as well. I could do an entire panel on literary citizenship, and perhaps I will at some point. But the point in growing a network is to have people who will help you. And the best way to have people who will help you is to help them. So, very important point. Now, my final slide, and then as I said, bonus pep talk, is about what your brand offers. And you can see I have 2 brands up here that I've created. One is Book Maven Media, one is Friday Reads. Friday Reads is a hashtag that's used on Twitter and Facebook and Instagram. I created it in 2009 because I was laid up with a broken leg and I wanted to know what everyone else was reading. So I started asking for people's Friday Reads with the hashtag in front of them. And to my surprise, it took off. People from all over the world started sharing the books that they were reading. And it was a marvelous thing. Friday Reads isn't a business. It's just a book sharing meme. It's not something that I am in charge of. I'm just happy to have created it and happy to have this little logo for it so that I can show it to other people, share it with other people have something to identify. So a brand doesn't have to be a moneymaker. It can be philanthropic. It can be inspirational. Book Maven Media is actually a business. It's where I do consultations. It's where I work with other writers. It's where I work with publishers and people who have questions about the publishing industry. So that brand directly fills my pockets, but it's also not the same as just being the Book Maven. It's also something that is its own thing. You can have different brands under your own brand. You can have different books that you write under different names. So I am going to stop now and just offer a few closing thoughts on what you can do when you have a brand, because this is what's really important to me. The thing that all of us share here today is an interest in books and writing and publishing. So if our brand gets in the way of what we need to do, then it's not doing us any good. So what I want to talk about for a couple of minutes is the idea of supporting your own creative life. Do not let whatever you do in brand building take over. Because if you are an author, a would-be author, a published author, someone who's writing essays, someone who's writing poetry, whatever it happens to be, you need time for your essential creative work. A brand should help you with that time. A brand should support that time. If the brand gets in the way and takes off, hire people, found a business. Don't let it get in the way. And I really am preaching to myself here too. As I told you earlier, I've got a book coming out in 2022 that's a memoir with Counterpoint Press. It's called Life Be. And I know that if I had continued to run a hamster wheel as the book maven promoting everyone else's work, I wouldn't have had the time to finish my memoir. And I have more things that I want to write and that I want to create on my own. So it was very important to me to understand how to protect my creative time. So if you're going to do branding as a writer or an author or a poet or a playwright, make sure that you take time for your creative work first. Back at AOL, which is where I started, we'll be at the top of the hour, I wondered for a long time how my boss, who was always so busy, her day's schedule was always filled, made time to go and get massages. They were offered on site. And she said, silly, all I do is put that down as a meeting time. No one knows what I'm doing, and it's essential to my well-being. Well, what's essential to us is writing. What's essential to us is the creative process. Put that on your schedule first. Maybe you write best in the morning, block out 8 to noon. Maybe you're better in the evening. Whatever it is, protect that time in your schedule and protect it from your branding, because again, the branding should support the writing and not the other way around. So I hope that this has been helpful to you. I hope that it has given you some idea about what you might want to do in building your brand. Normally, if I were giving this workshop in person, I would answer any questions you had right now. And it doesn't matter if they're tiny or huge, big concept or granular. But because this is pre-recorded, I know that I can't answer your questions or see them. So I want you to feel free to reach out to me. Again, my website is bethannepatrick.com, BethannePatrick.com. I can be found on Twitter at The Book Maven, and that's TheBookMaven. I can be found on Facebook at Bethanne Patrick, author and critic. And I am delighted to have you email me, info@BethanneTheBookMaven.com. I hope you found this workshop helpful. I hope that you attend many other panels and workshops here at the 1455 Summer Lit Festival, and I hope you'll join us next year. Thank you again so much for your time, and have a great, great summer. Right on. Welcome to the 1455.
Hi, all. We just finished up with Bethanne's presentation. We know that the PowerPoint slides were not of the best quality, so don't worry. We'll be making the entire presentation, including the deck, available to you on the 1455 website when we're all finished. So my apologies for the kind of funky quality of the session. We'll be taking a half-hour break, and we'll reconvene at 10:30, and hope you all will return for that next session. Thanks so much.